When you use work-life balance as an excuse, that is when you start falling behind on what you want to achieve. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Launch series. My name is Spencer, and today we're going to be talking about work-life balance. Before we can actually talk about it and get into more depth about how to tackle it for yourself, we still need to understand what that is. So the work-life balance, as most people intuitively know it, is essentially the balance you have between your work and your life, and people often categorize your life as hobbies, family, pleasures, all these things. In fact, it could even be like general house maintenance. And that's the balance. And people will always advocate for whether or not this should or shouldn't be a certain way in society. And at a certain degree, yes, it's definitely needs a balance in terms of what can be asked of you depending on where you are. Especially if you're a leader, whether it's your own business or your group, you may find that you're adding extra hours that you weren't originally committed to, or maybe it wasn't intended for you to have in the first place by your own intent. But just by definition alone, this is what a work-life balance is supposed to look like, the balance between work and life. Now, there's a couple things that you need to keep aware of when you look at this little balancing scale of work-life balance. See, what ends up happening is that people will have this scale, right? And they think that they need to make it so that work and life are balanced out completely the same no matter what. And this is actually where they start getting it wrong in terms of how you're supposed to be interpreting it. What ends up happening is that the work can end up being bigger than your life, right? However, just like in physics, even though there's a shorter load, but it's more work. In fact, I'll try and draw this a little bit better for you guys. So here's how it really looks. When you have more work, your life is farther away on that balancing beam because it takes more in order for you to balance that life, and that's just because of how much more work it is. So essentially, whatever it takes more time and life for time and energy for you to do in order to make the achievable results that you're intentionally pushing for, then the less it's going to take from here and the farther distance you're going to come from balanced, balanced being the two between life and work, right? There's going to be more work and it's going to have a shorter road, and it's going to create more of that distance between that life that you want to achieve. And this point here in the center is what people would consider an ideal, Oh, let me just put this. And the reason why this center point is ideal is because this is where your work should be. It should be this. I should be getting these results. I want to be the top 1%, blah, blah, blah. This ideal aspiration of yours at work and the ideal life they want to have at the same time. Now, these can be switched. This can be switched because if we were to look at this, you could simply have life take a lot from you, right? Which is going to be more time and energy. And you're going to have more, and you could have less work, right? Now, again, this being the ideal, this being the distance between this point here, okay? Now, this works on the idea that work and life is a zero-sum game. You can't have one without taking some from the other. And for a bit, it is true because we all have a certain amount of time that we use, and you have to realize how you want to spend that time. When you become a leader, And when you become someone who's either running an organization, a business, a team, whatever the case is, you can no longer rely on this because you're no longer trying to play a zero-sum game. The same way that making money is not a zero-sum game, the same way that making impact is not a zero-sum game, is the same way that it goes for leadership. When you're trying to then look at yourself and you're asking, well, I'm trying to achieve a result that's not zero-sum, but I want to make sure that I want to make sure that I'm balanced in my zero sum. And so you want to try and be balancing your zero sum game, but you also want to try to not get zero sum results. That doesn't actually work. It's not the same. If you look at it from an equation here, if you're to try to get a not zero sum game result, and you have a zero game input, then you're not getting the results. You're just not getting it. That doesn't work. That's not helping you at all. So now you may be asking, well, this is how, like you just said, this is how we live. We do live in a zero-sum world. Yes. All I'm saying is that you can't treat the zero-sum game that we have to live by as the same as trying to achieve the non-zero sum results. Okay? Because when you generate more impact, when you have more value that you're giving and people are giving you that appreciation in whatever way that is, it's not zero sum. It's a cumulative. And that's what I want you to realize about the calendar is that yes, there is a balance, and yes, that balance will strike up a balance. You might be striking up a balance in this pie where, it's 70% work and 30% life. You may be striking up a balance where you're able, for however reason, be able to make it 10% work and 90% life and still get your results. I don't want you to get hung up that there needs to be a balance between the ideal, because the truth is that once you get to a certain point of success, you are no longer constrained to this zero-sum game either. You can delegate your work. You can hire a VA. You can have people make your meals for you. Everything nowadays isn't attached to a zero sum, and people often confuse that. It's only because they're not working bigger than themselves as a leader or trying to generate something more than themselves that they get stuck in that mindset of it being zero sum. So will there be long days of work? Yes. That's because that's the natural balance you have to strike up. Like, that's part of you generating at that stage the impact in your leadership. Will it eventually get better? Who knows? That's up to you. Are you going to continuously seek out better ways to improve, faster ways to improve? Are you going to just keep putting your nose to the grindstone? As long as you don't give up, if you don't quit, you can't lose. And that's something that Alex Ramosi says, and that's a very powerful quote. It's in the same way here. If you forget about the fact that, life is a zero-sum game in terms of time and the work and life, balance between it, and just realize that the work's going to take what it's going to have to take, then you can, instead of being stuck on this little teeter-totter, instead of being stuck here, trying to balance your work and your life, when you acknowledge that that's just what it's going to take for you to have that and for you to have this, then all of a sudden you can move past that. You can start working from the ground up. Now you have the work here, you have the life here, and you're on the ground. You're on the ground here figuring out what you want to do, because you're no longer trying to, figure out how you're going to balance on this beam, but you're going to be instead looking at your life and your work and figuring out what to do better for yourself to make it better. So All this really is just to demonstrate the example that people get really hung up on work-life balance, and they get really hung up on trying to make it equal or an ideal comparison without acknowledging the fact that that's just what it's going to take, and do it. Some of you may be asking, well, how do I strike a balance for you? You got to get really, really clear on what you want from your work and from your life, okay? For example, for work and life, if you want your sales numbers to be 10, let's say that you're a sales manager and you're trying to hit some sales targets, and you want them to be 10% higher than they were last quarter or last month, or from the target that's set. Let's say it's going to take 20% more time, energy, and resources for you to get that result, to make sure that you get that result. And that's going to take minus 20% away from whatever you have in your life. That's just what it is, right? So let's say, for example, we're going to just start at the base here. Let's say that you have a 50-50, team's not doing so hot, or you really want to hit the next target. So you add 20% more effort here, which takes away 20% effort here, and now you're left with 70% and 30%. Okay? Now, if that's the case, then what you're going to look at is the payoff. Like, do you feel like that was really valuable for your time and impact? No, not really. Okay, great. So instead of getting to this point here where you have to end up sacrificing one for the other, you now need to get creative about getting yourself out of this zero-sum game. People will end up working with other people all the time, even in marriage. People will work on a way to expand their time, resources, and energy so that they're no longer constrained to a zero-sum game. So let's assume that you're not married though, and let's assume that you still need to think of creative ways. If you have your plate full at 50%, and you want to keep your life at the same balance here, and let's assume that it's still at 20%, instead of just adding onto your work and taking away from your life, what you can do instead is you delegate 20% of work that anyone can do. So anyone else can do, right? You delegate that away so that 20% is still getting completed and that balance is still the same. But Spencer, if that's the case, I'm going to have to reach out to someone. I'm going to have to hire someone. Yes. Yes, you are. And that's what it is. This is leverage. This is what gets you out of this work-life balance and starts making you out of this zero-sum game of how to spend your time. You need other people's help. And as soon as you're able to do that, I'd say as soon as you can hire someone for part-time, and yes, search it up, do your own research, then you should have a VA. No problemo. And that's going to change your life forever. Because eventually, when you want to hit bigger and bigger targets, because there's more and more payoff, there's better results, there's going to be more to do, and you can't do it yourself. So again, you delegate what anyone can do at that point, leave for yourself what you can only do, and when you hit that ceiling that someone can, you can only do what you do, that's perfect, because then you can hire out other people for them to become the specialist instead of you being the generalist as a leader. You can even promote people within your team so that you've empowered them, so that you have brought them up within the ranks, so that they may have a piece of the pie, so that they may get the chance to leverage and delegate and have better results. And you want to replicate this with all of your leaders. You want them to make sure that they understand the balance that they're currently working with in their work-to-life ratio. And you want them to be empowered in branching out, delegating, and making sure that they have that space, time, and energy in order to fulfill what they want, in order to hit those targets that they want to do. And if someone isn't willing to work with that, then you just gotta tell them you're working with a zero-sum game as it is. Only once you leverage other people's time and resources by enrolling them in either their vision or your vision and or paying them, well, you start to be making results that are bigger than just yourself. And this is, again, assuming that you want to keep a 50-50 split on your work and life. It doesn't have to be the case. In fact, for myself, I find that I'm much more happier with the anywhere between 60 and 80 sometimes, to the 40 and 20, depending on what is needed from me. Burnout is when people have a break between their work and their life. Something snaps. And most of the time, it's them. Because they're in the middle here, they're trying to balance it out. So now they're trying to pick up one side and pick up the other at the same time, and it's not going to work. The thing is that if you're enrolled and you're bought into your own vision and your own purpose and the own results that you want to create for yourself as a leader, then what's going to end up happening is you're not going to suffer burnout, because this is perceived. This is perceived as it breaking. When in reality, if you really removed yourself from the equation, you're going to find that, if anything, it's just bending here. It's just bending. It's not actually broken. It's just bent. And the only reason why it's bent is because your perception is that both were too heavy to bear. And when you remind yourself that you do want these results, and when you enroll yourself in every activity of the day that's going towards your goals more, and you get more and more bought in, more enrolled in what you're trying to achieve, then all of a sudden that bent load of the bar becomes lighter and lighter, because you're no longer thinking of it as a burden, you're thinking of it as a blessing. And everyone feels lighter when they have a blessing compared to when they have a burden, and that's just it. It's just the perception. So when you think it's a blessing, the bar comes back and you're completely fine with wherever you're at. Fine to say the least. You're more happy or more fulfilled in what you're doing. And people say, well, Spencer, how am I supposed to think of it as a burden when it's a blessing? How am I supposed to think of it as a blessing when it's a burden? And again, simple answer, change perception. If you then say, well, Spencer, I'm getting really sick and I'm not able to perform because things just keep coming up for me, then you gotta realize again that it's not you saying that the burn's too much, because at that point you're telling me that this load isn't that heavy for you mentally. All you're saying is that physically your body can't keep up. And it's true, you have one body, and like I said before, the body can pick up the work and pick up the life at the same time. Even when the bar is straight, it can't do it because you have to reach down for the other and the other. The only way that you can have this being picked up is by someone else, You need other people in that case for that. So that's why you need to start delegating work, and or just cutting out the work that is busy and not the work that's impactful. Think about anything that moves the needle, that's for you, and then delegate anything that doesn't move the needle at all. That's for someone else. And you can pay VAs pretty cheap in order to do that. And that's how I'd say that you address that kind of burnout. I hope that was really educational for you guys, and I hope that you got a lot out of it. Comment down below, what are your thoughts on work-life balance? How does that affect you and your teams? And make sure to subscribe so I can see you all in the next video.